It's been 2 months since Ike roared ashore and blasted the Texas coast. You know, obviously the combination of high winds and the surge laid waste to a very significant portion of the Texas coast. Now, 2 months later, long after the search and rescue teams have returned home, the waters have receded and TV trucks have headed back on to the next big story. This area is still struggling to restore itself to, in many places, just the basics of life. Debris piles are everywhere. People are sleeping in tents near their shattered homes. Winter's approaching. We owe our citizens, our neighbors, our family members, a united effort to resolve this. In an effort to accelerate the rebuilding process, I'm here today to announce the creation of the Governor's Commission for Disaster Recovery and Renewal. Led by Judge Echols, this team's going to be comprised of leaders from across the affected area as well as the decision makers from the private sector and all levels of government. Working together, this team is going to pursue a three-part strategy based on the realities of the situation on the ground. To tackle a challenge like this, you need proper funding. You need coordination between government entities, business, and nonprofit groups, and an emphasis on the economic development to speed the recovery. On the funding front, my office has been working since before the storm ever made landfall to secure reasonable levels of federal dollars for the recovery effort. All along, we simply asked that Texas receive the same considerations afforded Louisiana when Hurricane Katrina impacted that state. And I will tell you, the response from Washington has been pretty underwhelming. After a presidential disaster declaration, there was an initial burst of federal funding, but the 100% reimbursement for debris removal didn't last long enough to finish the job. Over a month ago, I asked for an 18-month reimbursement for debris removal, and I have yet to hear officially from Washington. Last week, and this is really irritating to me, last week the Director of Homeland Security told leaders in this area of Texas that we would not receive funding on par with post-Katrina because of Texas budget surplus. And that's not only unprecedented, it is unacceptable to penalize a state that has made good decisions, made hard decisions, have been fiscally disciplined over the last few years. You know, how is it that Washington can shower $700 billion on mismanaged Wall Street firms, but they can't spare the funds needed to help Broadway Street in Galveston, or Texas Avenue in Bridge City, or Gulfway Drive in Sabine Pass? So, thanks to the congressional inactivity, if you will, in Washington, Texans are unlikely to start seeing federal aid until at least next summer. Our coastal region is significant to our state, and for that matter, the national economy is entirely too high to let this recovery continue at this snail's pace. Texas is too important to the national economy. These areas, these folks who live in them need to be getting back on their feet. They need to be getting back to normal as soon as they can. And they need it now. That's why I created this Hurricane Ike recovery and coordination effort last month. And I asked Judge Echols and my former Chief of Staff, Brian Newby, to head it up, get their arms around the situation, if you will. Working closely with the local leaders, they pulled together a summary of the area's recovery costs. Brian just returned from Washington, D.C., where he delivered a clear statement of needs to the Texas congressional delegation and to the federal officials. I wish I could tell you I'm optimistic about what Washington is going to be eventually doing. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not holding my breath. That's why today I'm directing TxDOT to take responsibility for debris removal all across the affected area. Working with their own crews and contractors, they're going to take the lead in removing debris that's obstructing roadways, that are posing health risks, that are slowing our reconstruction. At the same time, I've asked Judge Eccles to lead this new Commission for Disaster Recovery and Renewal. This charge is to recommend approaches that'll help Texas recover from future storms, like strengthening our critical infrastructure. But my immediate concern is more on those Texans who have been displaced by this storm of Hurricane Ike. Post-disaster housing is a nationwide problem. And it's a problem that's raging about, debates of formaldehyde-tainted housing, about local permitting problems, who's to blame. There's too much of that going on. We need to be helping our people get into housing. We all know the wheels in Washington, D.C. turn slowly, but such a pace is unacceptable when we have Texans sleeping in cars next door to trailers with locks on them. One would think that the federal government would have a workable system after all the disasters that they've had to deal with. But their experts seem to reinvent the wheel at every crisis. Bottom line is the system doesn't work and the time for pointing fingers has passed. These problems affect Texans, so Texans are going to fix them. Instead of waiting for bright ideas from Washington, the members of this commission are going to work with local officials and business leaders to devise a plan tailored for their specific communities. When the next storm hits, the plan will help Texans put their lives back together faster and more effectively. Texans endured this storm together, and today we're pushing even harder to get life along the coast back to normal.